The basket makers were treated seriously in a popular article Dr. Pruden wrote for June 1897 issue of Harper's Monthly. It was titled, "An Elder Brother to the Cliff Dwellers," and based entirely upon information which Richard supplied to his friend. A somewhat more scientific treatment was given in 1902 in a pamphlet written for the American Museum of Natural History Journal by George H. Pepper, but this too was based largely upon Richard's notes and was illustrated with photographs from the Wetherill Hyde and the McLeod Graham collections. So far as archaeologists of the day were concerned, Pruden's article and Pepper's summary of the others' findings only inspired more condemnation of Richard as a charlatan. Alfred Kidder, first archaeologist to offer proof of Richard's discoveries, has recalled that when he was a student at Harvard, a professor in one of his classes spoke scornfully of the basket makers as a hoax conceived by Richard Wetherill. The professor told the students that Richard had taken his undeformed skulls, baskets, and sandals and had segregated them from the rest of his Grand Gulch collection to create a myth of an early basket race. In that way, the students were told, Richard Wetherill had increased the sales value of his collection, but not its credibility. This attitude of scornful disbelief changed suddenly a few years later when Kidder went into northeastern Arizona to work with S.J. Guernsey. As soon as Guernsey and I got to the caves of the Mountain Monuments area and Marsh Pass, we found exactly the same sort of basket maker remains Wetherill had described, Dr. Kidder recalled. They reported their findings at White Dog Cave and elsewhere, and their colleagues took respectful notice. That immediately changed everything. Faith was restored, and basket makers ceased to be a myth after 1914. Richard told Dr. Pruden his first discovery of the basket makers was in a cave in Cottonwood Wash, rather than in nearby Butler Wash, as some writers have said. And in writing the discovery to Moorhead of the archaeologist, Richard said, 2 feet below the lowest remains of the cliff dwellers, we found remains of quite a different tribe. In other ways, too, it was a startling discovery. 92 skeletons were found in mass burials, the broken bones mute evidence of his prehistoric massacre by some stronger band. The skulls of most had been crushed, but whether before or after death, in some cases, was uncertain because stone projectile points were found among the ribs and embedded in the backbones. An atlatl point was buried in the top of one skull, protruding at an angle which indicated the shaft had penetrated the victim's throat under the chin. Driven through the pelvis of another skeleton, Richard found a huge obsidian blade transfixing and pinning the hip bones together like a skewer. Richard marveled at the force revealed by that fatal thrust. More evidence of violence was found when Richard reached Grand Gulch, and in one cave uncovered 9 mummies. One of these was a very old man, nearly 6 feet tall. He had been slashed, apparently with a stone knife, across the full width of his back and also across his lower abdomen. The ragged wound had been sewed up with a cord of braided human hair 1/8 of an inch thick, the stitches paced roughly 1/2 an inch apart, as rudely as one might mend a gunny sack. The body was unusually well preserved, head tilted up and back as though the old man suffered unendurable pain at the time of death. Left hand clutching right wrist, and right hand gripping the wound on the abdomen, both legs flexed, knees drawn up tightly. Richard studied the poor fellow carefully, and then to Talbot Hyde he wrote, "Whether it is a specimen of surgery or not, I have not yet determined. It seems most horrible to me. The face seems to indicate pain. In the same grave were other grisly remains, a pair of feet and legs cut off at the knees, and with them a pair of hands and arms amputated at the elbows, the rest of the body missing. Buried with the old man and the dismembered limbs, he found an oddly carved piece of wood, canoe-shaped, 18 inches long by 4 inches wide and 2 inches deep. In the space where it had been hollowed out, he found 2 pouches made from the skin of mountain sheep. One of the pouches contained a stone knife blade, still attached to its wood handle, a bone awl, and some loose spear points. Tied up in another pouch were smaller bags filled with lumps of coloring matter. The nature of these articles and their presence in the grave told nothing. Such burial offerings were found frequently in basket-maker graves. Richard was an engaging conversationalist, expressing his thoughts or ideas with ease and often with humor. When he gripped a pen, however, the wells of expression dried up and his style resolved into awkward sentences. He was conscious of this and mentioned it at the end of the letter to Dr. Pruden, giving his friend requested information about the basket makers. The letter was written after the first hide exploring expedition trip to Grand Gulch, and at the time when the doctor was completing his article for Harper's Monthly. I meant for you to use my notes and photos and take from them whatever you wish to use. I did not understand what you could get from a dry scientific paper. You already understand what we call the caves. Apparently, at one time there was a smooth dirt floor in them several feet in thickness. It is not likely they were used as places of residence at all. In these floors, egg-shaped holes were dug in cases where the sand was soft, and they were walled up and plastered, but the majority were merely finished with plaster, smoothing the interior. Many of these are found in one cave. Originally, they may have been intended for caches, since both the Paiute and the Navajo use the same thing for storing grain near their fields by digging some high spot where the water will drain away. I believe it is the custom of the present Indians to build a fire inside and thoroughly bake the linings of the cache. This, of course, would drive out all moisture and make a safe granary. The basket people, as we call them, seem to be confined to a very small area. How far west they may extend, we do not know, but the Cottonwood Wash seems to be the eastern limit, and Elk Mountain the northern. Canyon de Siel at the mouth is the southern on this side of the Colorado. What may be found on the other side I do not know, but I have a faint suspicion that if the Paiute country is well prospected, the results would be similar. In these potholes or caches are found the bodies of all ages and sexes, sandals upon the feet, human hair, G-string, cedar bark breechcloth, beads around their necks, all wrapped in a blanket made of rabbit fur, of a weed similar to the feather cloth. Then they are found in a mummy cloth or a sack such as the Peruvians used. This is made from yucca cloth fiber, and good cloth it is. Over the head is a small basket, flat, about 20 inches in diameter, usually found in good condition. Apaches make one similar today. Along the arms are scattered spear points, fine bone awls, long ones. All have a hook on one end. Never a stone axe has been found. Small baskets containing corn and seeds with ornaments are usually near the head. Whenever an atlatl is found, it's broken and was on top of the body. The pipes are usually in small baskets near the head. Overall is a large basket. Nearly always 2 bodies are found in one grave. No pottery has been found in one of these potholes. The skulls are all natural, long and narrow. We've made our greatest finds in caves where no cliff dweller ruins are found. The sandals are not all square-toed, but differ from the cliff dwellers in the way of having an indentation at the little toe. The letter shows Richard as a keen observer, not only of objects found and their relationship to other prehistoric and modern tribes, but of objects missing. Every archaeologist knows the importance of this. The object missing can be as significant in the science of reconstructing ancient history as an object present. Here, as in every other place he worked, Richard was conscious of this, and that is why he emphasized that in these basket maker sites he found no pottery, bows and arrows, or stone axes, and the caves were probably not used as places of residence at all. In conclusion of his letter, Richard expressed in one brief paragraph his aspirations and admitted his greatest handicap. I want to make myself thoroughly acquainted with the whole Southwest. Sometime in the future, I hope to do something in way of putting my work in book form. But first, I must be educated. This is a rather slow process. Richard did become acquainted with a large part of the Southwest, but was never able to publish anything in book form. Largely for that reason, his pioneering work generally has failed to receive recognition. There are a few notable exceptions. John Otis Brew, director of Harvard University Peabody Museum, has written that the work of Richard and his brothers can be argued as the most far-reaching single event in Southwestern archaeology. Remarking on Richard's failure to publish the results of his finding, Brew added that, although the influence of the work and deductions of the Wetherills has been widely felt, it has come to us mainly from the pens of others and through collections of artifacts of various museums. Most of their operations have not been described in print. In his article for Harper Monthly, Dr. Pruden generously acknowledged the help Richard had given him and concluded on a wry note. Will none of our great universities realize before it is too late that the treasure house of folklore among the Pueblo Indians is crumbling fast, and these fields of American archaeology in the Southwest are wide and fruitful? That appeal would go unheeded until a later generation, beginning with Kidder, Guernsey, and Nelson, took to the field about 1914, 4 years or so after Richard's death.
And I feel like New York City. Get me to the fun.